Hey guys, welcome back to Cult of Film, and we're back with Truman. And today we are reviewing probably one of my favorite films of 2023. Had no idea what I was getting into when a friend of mine just said, "Hey, come with me to see this movie." I hadn't seen a trailer, I hadn't seen advertisements, I hadn't even seen the poster until we got to the theater. And I'm kind of glad that I was going in so blind, much like when I saw um, Get Out in 2017. I had only seen a 10-second trailer, and I knew it was supposed to be a horror film, but had no idea what I was in for. And yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, Saltburn is my favorite film of 2023, just because this is, by the way, the second film from writer director and absolute genius Emerald Fennell, who a few years ago did Promising Young Woman, which was another film that just haunted me for months after I watched it. But yeah, you just saw this, Truman. So yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, I saw it literally last night, so I'm still kind of
Oh,
in the process
okay.
of digesting it. But yeah, I think I was surprised. I was definitely surprised by this movie.
Right,
It had a lot of things that I
right.
wasn't expecting to say the least. But I think what really surprised me was my experience of watching it was very different from how I usually feel when I'm watching a movie. Typically, kind of at this point, when I'm watching a movie, I can generally get a good read on how I'm going to feel about it fairly early on. There's a lot of indicators. It's like, how the the cinematography looks and sort of how the camera's being used and all these kind of technical things. Um, you can kind of tell whether or not you're going to like something pretty quick. And with
Mhm.
this, as it started, um, I was thinking like, it's a good, very good looking movie, and the lighting in this movie is really fantastic. Like,
Incredible.
looks very, very good. Um, but I was like, it's a good looking movie, but it's like kind of, yeah, like you said earlier, teen romance film that, yeah, it's cool. And there are
And we
certain,
should maybe give a little bit of a premise for those of you that haven't seen it. And we should warn you, this is one of those that it's going to be really hard for us to talk about without probably giving away some spoilers. So if you
yeah,
want to see this movie, it is streaming on Amazon Prime right now. If you have a Prime membership, go watch it right now. But do not finish watching this episode of us talking about it, because we're probably going to ruin a few things for you. And I really don't want you to do that. I want you to go in as ignorant as we were when we saw this
yeah,
film. But yeah, what you said, it really starts off. It feels like the BBC made a CW sort of young person's drama. You have
yeah.
this character um, uh, played by God. I don't know any of these actors. It's really bad.
Barry Keoghan,
Yeah, what's that?
Barry Keoghan, the main guy.
Barry Keoghan, who I believe he's either been nominated for an Oscar or won one already. He plays sort of a lower class kid who gets into Oxford and
Mm.
slowly sort of gets to know people. He's sort of befriended by an older kid who absolutely comes from money, played by Jacob Elordi. And yeah, it starts out very much like a young person's. You think it's going to be like a college drama, these two away at university, and them sort of maneuvering the differences in class and all of that. And there is plenty of that, but it really unfolds a lot from there. it's this
Mhm.
is this movie is the proverbial onion, where we just keep pulling back layer after layer after layer, and it just keeps going. And the beauty of this film is it makes it virtually impossible to predict where it's going. You absolutely think and then they reveal another layer, like, oh, okay, we're going in this direction. And
Mhm.
in a time where I feel our industry is playing it so safe, they want to do the things that made money last year and the year before. I love writer directors like Emerald Fennell, because she's doing stuff that's completely original, it's more evocative of the 70s of Scorsese, of Friedkin. That it's again unpredictable. It's purely original, and you're going along for the ride. So sorry, please.
Right. And yeah, and to that end, I think that part of what this film succeeds in is that it manages, there are a number of beats where they happen and I just think like, man, like I really did not anticipate that was where this was going to go. And it doesn't feel like it's, you know, this just kind of shocking. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are certain things that are just kind of just plain shocking, but
Right.
the kind of narrative beats that I wasn't expecting, they really do feel like they kind of caught me off guard, and in a way that I was like very pleasantly surprised. It was like, oh, like that was pretty well executed, and it doesn't feel cheap. And that was really what got me invested more in it. And where initially it 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 my my initial perception of the film was that it was going to be, this kind of teen romance, and there's some good bits about, critiquing sort of very wealthy university students. But then as the film started to kind of unfold, and we get all these different scenes, um, I started looking at things like, man, like this is actually going somewhere, and it ends very strong. And
Mhm.
I was very pleasantly surprised by that.
Agreed. Agreed. It's well, one, it's beautifully written. Fennell
Hmm.
is an absolute master of unfolding plot. This really felt a lot like something. There were so many elements of Hitchcock, the suspense, the not knowing where it's going, and then it had these really provocative, not just like you said, story beats and narrative, but the the cast is so good. You have Barry Keoghan, you have Jacob Elordi, who's pretty new, but then you have people like Rosamund Pike and Richard E. Grant that are just absolutely phenomenal. Everybody knows who Richard E. Grant is. I mean, people, at least people who watch, well, this show, and yeah, this family, and it's Oliver, who is the Oliver Quick, who is the lower class kid from the suburbs, and then you have Felix, who is he's the rich kid, and he pulls Oliver into to go to see his family, stay with his family for is it Christmas, or I can't remember what holiday it is. Anyways, and we get to know Felix is really eccentric family, and they're really a fun group of characters. They really are.
Hmm.
And it's sort of the way it's set up, you really have no idea what's coming, and the twists and the turns. And even when it does really shift, like once you get about halfway through, you don't know that there's even more coming, and more and more. When it's the Saltburn, where the movie is named after it. It's I think it's a fictional mansion that Felix's
Yeah.
family, it's like their ancestral home there in English countryside, and it's absolutely beautiful. The cinematography is absolutely fantastic. Fennell is an incredible director, and I'm trying to cinematography is by Linus Sandgren. This individual is incredibly talented. There isn't. It's one of those films, which again, I don't know if you've seen Promising Young Woman, but Promising Young Woman is another. Promising Young Woman basically is Taxi Driver for the Me Too era. And I'm not trying to reduce Fennell's work to someone else's, but in terms of like to explain it to somebody who's never seen it, it's as if a woman wrote her own version of Taxi Driver. That's what it is.
Mhm.
This one, Saltburn, I can't really find any film, with the except, I mean, maybe some films with certain plot devices that really compare to this. Um, it's There's so much intrigue. It's a very sexy movie too. It's something that
Yeah.
Fennell does too. And again, this is another reason why if you haven't seen it, please turn this off, go watch the movie, and come back.
Yeah.
Um, she, God, how do I put this? She and there's other directors out there are single-handedly sort of correcting the over not overuse, because I have no problem with nudity. I have no problem with nudity in film. I have no problem with the nude form or the human body.
Right.
But she is equalizing, I guess, equal timing nudity, and it's really, in a way, it's a lot of, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a weirdo. It's fucking fun. I think it's fun. There's
Yeah.
an innocence and a fun about these young people, just sort of just being young and being free and just enjoying themselves. Um, yeah, and then then it takes a turn, and some of it gets much darker, and yeah, it's. She explained kind of what this movie is, but I don't want more. Like when she was asked, when you set out to make Saltburn, what was it that you were trying to make? And I don't want to give that answer just yet. We'll do it maybe towards the end. But it's exactly what the movie is. And this, again, she's really she's up there for me with Jordan Peele and Tarantino in terms of people who, no matter what they make in coming years, I absolutely will watch everything this woman does. So, sorry,
Right.
kick it back to you, my friend.
And I think one of the other things that is very impressive about the film is that, in recent years, there's been this kind of spate of films that deal with the theme that Saltburn is about, which is about kind of the relationships that exist between people of different social classes.
Mm-hmm.
Parasite came out and was huge, and in my mind, I think Parasite still kind of is like the final word in the modern films that deal with these issues of class and the dynamics. I think it's a very, very well done movie, obviously. But in the wake of that, there have been a lot of other films of kind of like varying degrees of quality that deal with those same ideas, and have never quite had the same degree of tact. Not necessarily that they were bad, but there were things like Triangle Sadness came out, and there's a Menu, and there's a number of others. And Saltburn deals with these themes as well. But I started to kind of get sick of these specific types of movies, just because it was like we've been seeing this now for a number of years, and as with anything that's wildly successful, people kind of invariably ape it and iterate on it until everyone kind of looks around and says, "Okay, that's enough. We don't need any more of this." And I was pretty much there, but I think, again, if nothing else, Saltburn really surprised me in the sense that it is a movie that is about these themes, which I've gotten pretty sick of at this point. And I still felt like, oh, this is bringing something fresh to the table. This has something else to say
Right.
beyond what a lot of these other movies have kind of had to offer. And so, because of that, I think it's a testament to how well it's shot, because I think that was what initially clued me into this being a movie that was better than my first impression of it. And I think ultimately, yeah, it has enough to surprise me and kind of keep me invested that at the end of the day, I felt, again, like very just pleasantly surprised with what it's about.
Right. And
So
I
with,
think
with
I just want to clarify for people who haven't seen it. This is not a movie about class. Like, to your point about the Menu, Triangle of Sadness, I didn't watch Triangle of Sadness, and I probably will, but I purposely didn't watch it because I already saw the setup. I mean, I think, and I think it can be very easy. Nothing against the people who made Triangle of Sadness. Maybe I'll watch it, but I'm always really reticent to watch, especially modern Hollywood films that try to deal with class, because it almost always demonizes the rich people and attempts to turn poor people into angels. And that's not necessarily the case. As someone who has been up and down on the socioeconomic ladder, there's multiple reasons why that happens. And I don't think that there's a tendency to phone it in and make it more black and white in terms of, okay, rich, evil, poor, good. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah,
and Parasite, I think did a really great job. But even then, it's sort of like there were times with the family in Parasite, the poor family. I'm like, there's so many other things you could be doing right now. Like I feel like, and I mean, the movie is called Parasite, and for those of you that haven't seen it, the parasites are the rich people. I think that's what people think it is, but that's not really the case. There's a
Right.
really satisfying, crazy ass ending, but the entire time I watch, for as beautiful as it is, and I think everyone should see it. It's a classic. The Koreans have been crushing it. They're doing some of the best film out there. In terms of the reality of it, I'm like, there's so many other things you folks could have done other than this. But the movie doesn't work if they don't do that. So you have to have that.
Yeah, you
But
can
with
say that
Saltburn,
about a lot of movies.
if they chose to do the right things, but with Saltburn, it's like, okay, we established that there are people of immense wealth, and there are people with less of it, and that's sort of there that fits into the larger narrative that's going on, but it is by no means the driver. I don't, and it seems like it is for like a period of time, and it's certainly a important thread within the film, but it's not what it's all about. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I mean, yeah, there is a lot going on with it. Do you want to just kind of get into just like the full blown spoiler stuff? Because there's a lot I want to talk about.
Yeah, go right ahead. So at this point now, we've warned you all 3 times to turn this off and go to Amazon Prime right now, Prime Video, and watch this movie and come back. So if you haven't, it's your own fault.
Yeah.
Dig in, Truman.
So I really like a movie that has a lot of ambiguity. Where
Yes.
when a film, when a film ends and you have to think about it a little bit, kind of decide where you stand with a character and how did they really feel about these things. And I think that it nails that pretty well. I think it has this ambiguity surrounding Oliver, the protagonist's relationship to Jacob Elordi, Felix. At the end we have this this sort of shock
Yeah,
twist.
that
Where,
ending, man. Ooh.
yeah,
Well, actually,
it's
there's multiple endings. It's almost that's the other thing too is they could have ended the movie 3 or 4 times. Like you could have just cut right there, and that would have been it. And then she keeps giving you more. Again, genius. Please.
yeah, and it's yeah. I think its ability to kind of continually like unspool that and just kind of that really was one of the things that shocked me in the movie is how it's like, oh, okay, this Felix is dead, and we like at that point I was pretty certain that like Barry Keoghan had killed him. But I was like, okay, he's dead, and he's gonna stick around a little, and he's just gonna kind of hang on, and then it just keeps going. It's like, oh my god, he's killing every member of this family,
Right.
and just like
Spoiler.
completely taking their place. Which is just a crazy, crazy direction to take the film, and it's great. And like it's very bold, obviously, in many kind of like the film is very bold in many kind of superficial senses, in the sense that there's a lot of very graphic sexuality, and Barry Keoghan, like he really, really goes for it. It's lots of
Yeah.
nudity, lots of very
Lots of
provocative
very.
stuff.
There's no mystery surrounding Mr. Keegan after this film. Yeah.
Yeah, like watching this in the funeral scene, watching this really long one take where he's just like sobbing, and then he starts taking off his clothes, like his tie and then his shirt, and he starts taking off all his clothes, and he starts like humping the grave. It's like, man, that's
Yeah.
a crazy scene to have in there. But I think having the entire film really, really goes for it, and that's something that I really appreciate in a film as well. A film that it doesn't feel like it's pulling any punches. It doesn't feel like it's been watered down or censored in some way. When we get like kind of what feels like the unadulterated vision, I think a film is much stronger for it. Even if certainly it'll turn off some people who watch it because it is so graphic. I think the film is much stronger for it, and I really like the ending scene too. You know, I like a good dance sequence at the end of a movie. I grew up on Shrek,
Right.
uh, and just watching Barry Keoghan just kind of like dance around this
No,
castle.
I don't think I don't. It's one of those. No, you're absolutely. It's one of those moments in a film at the very end where I don't think I've ever seen that free of performance. And something else again to the point that I made earlier is it would have been nothing to have seen this type of thing in another movie and it be a woman completely stripped down and nude doing this dance around the house. And
Mm,
again, sort of the brilliance of Fennell that it's not a woman, it's a
yeah,
man doing it, and it's there's no like I feel like with a lot of male nudity, at least uh, for a period of time, there are always very clever cuts and shots to sort of disguise things that he's nude, but we're not going to show you the full Monty. And I think it was sort of brilliant that she doesn't bother to do that at all, because again, if it was a woman in the same role doing the same thing, there would be no clever cuts. There would be none of that. So it's really really brilliant choices that she makes. The
yeah,
and it mentioned the stuff with the grave. It leads you first. It's like, okay, these two people from different classes making friends at university, and then it sort of unfolds from there, and you think, okay, this guy it might be a straight guy who is he falling in love with this male friend of his, and then it sort of leads you into that area. Then the loss of what happens, and then it sort of takes you from there. It's like, okay, he's still, Oliver's still hanging around the family. Well, why would he do that? And that's when like you said, it continues to unspool, and one by one, people start disappearing, and it's just like I said, she could have cut it several times, and it would have been a fantastic film, but she just keeps you keep going down the rabbit hole, and things just keep getting revealed, and it's just really really brilliant, and just again, the composition and the cinematography of this film are something too. There's
mm,
there's no point in the film where, like, if you were to pause it, where you wouldn't just be getting just an amazing shot.
mm,
It's reminiscent of Hitchcock for me. There's so many Hitchcock films where you could pause it at any moment, and it just sort of looks like a beautifully composed sort of painting or portrait. And there's so much of that in this film too. And
yeah,
I'm Promising Young Woman is there's something about the lighting and the use of color in these two films that really reminds me of Nicholas Winding Refn. If you watch
mm.
Drive or you
Yeah,
watch
that's a good comparison. Yeah,
Only God Forgives, there's a really beautiful use of color palette and lighting that just makes everything so gorgeous, and then makes so many of those scenes that we've talked about and the provocative nature of it. It really just ooh, this the bar has been so raised in this film, in
yeah.
my opinion, that it's just like wow. Like I watched it leaving. I'm like, whoo, I really have work. I have work to do. This is great.
Yeah, and I like how much ultimately at the end of the film, there's a really great scene where throughout the film Barry Keoghan has been doing this kind of monologue. He's talking, and it's a very standard like framing device. Where a character is talking to some mystery person off screen, and we don't know who it
Right.
is, but that's how they frame the story, and then we get into it, and then they give us a little more insight as the film goes
And
on.
that starts really near the beginning. And I guess we should mention that we
Yeah,
we're sort of in his college years, but we're also occasionally flashing back to like present day of him, because I think the movie starts in 2006, I think, or the college years
2002.
start in 2006, but then we keep flashing back to this interview that's sort of present day, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, ultimately, like when we end, there's this constant questions. What starts the movie, and it's asked throughout the movie, and it ends the movie, and he says like, "Well, did I love him?" And there's this kind of constant back and forth. And towards the end, when everything has been revealed and we know what he's done, it's a very very interesting moment to have, because he asks after he's killed Felix and he's killed all of his family and he's stolen everything that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And he's asking himself again, like, did I love him? And we get these very brief flashes of like these close-ups of Felix, that's from like his POV in these very intimate moments, and the color reflects that. It's got this very saturated, very warm, and very kind of like sentimental feeling to it. And he asks himself, and we see that, which I think kind of represents sort of how he actually feels, and kind of hints that maybe the relationship was started with the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, we cut away from that, and then he goes, "No, I never loved him." And he's like, "In fact, I hated him, and I hate all of you." And it's that kind of really cool question to sort of end a movie on, that leaves you thinking about it a little longer. It's like, well, did he? Like
No,
how
and then no,
how
that's
much
really
of it,
sort of like the
or is he just
unresolved.
getting?
Yeah, the unresolved motivation. It something like, was he always a psychopath, or was it this moment and him meeting this person that activated like the, I don't know, the latent psychopathy in him, or was that sort of like, was the reveal of that psychopathy, was that always there, or was there something about meeting this particular individual and this particular family that just ignited something in him that made him think, oh yeah, these people need to be removed from the planet? It's an interesting question, because his response, no, I never loved him. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe that's absolutely true. Maybe it was like, no, it was a psychopathy, wanted to kill him from the moment I saw him. He's tall, he's handsome, he's rich, and I'm not, so I want to destroy him. Or was it the reality that I could never have him that made me lose my mind and just go ham on him and his family? It's an interesting question, because you can see it either way. Not only in him responding, no, I never loved him. That could be a very male response, in that,
Yeah.
no, I never loved him, because I'm not going to show my vulnerability. And now on top of that, I'm going to protect myself and say, no, I didn't love him. In fact, I hated him. So it's you could see that too. Like, I could believe that he truly hated him and just only wanted to do harm, but I could also see sort of like the male ego protecting itself and saying, no, I'm not like that. I don't know. Fucking hated him. That's why I did what I did. And the
Yeah, and
whole
that's
thing, maybe the entire thing is sort of a protection of sort of like the fear of one's own same-sex feelings. You know what I mean? You can look at it that way. That's like, okay, whoa, I'm way over obsessed with this guy, and I need to make sure that that isn't there. So to remove my own internalized homophobia, I have to destroy him and his family. Not beyond the realm of possibility. There's people out there that will hurt others because of their own internal feelings.
Yeah. And I think ultimately he went into the situation, obviously after everything has happened, we kind of see he's got this super villain monologue, and then he rips out Rosa Pike's breathing to him. It's like, Jesus,
Oh,
dude, that's
yeah.
pretty cold.
Yeah.
But I think his intention from the beginning was kind of malicious, where we go through and we see where he like busted the tire on Felix's bicycle, stuff like that, where he's kind of planting.
We get it reveals later on all of the premeditated things that he did early on in the film. Jacob Elordi, Felix, he's got a busted tire and he's got to get to the other side of campus, and Oliver loans him his bike, and it seems so kind. And again, it sets up what you think it's going to be. And then later on, we see all of the machinations of all the things that he did to set up Felix, to set up the mother, to set up the father, to set up the sister. And it's wild.
Yeah. And in seeing him do that, I think his intention initially was to do what he ultimately did.
What he did.
Right. I think what part of it has to do with the fact that when he throughout the the movie, there are a couple of beats that felt very abrupt to me, where like he is, we start the film and he's this very nerdy, very quiet and reclusive kind of guy. He's in his first year at university. Um, and then he goes and hangs out with Felix for a bit, and all of a sudden he's got all this like gall to him. He's like having sex with the sister. He's flirting with the guy's mom, like very openly, and like just planting these seeds like he's a Game of Thrones character. And initially when that happened, when it first started happening throughout the movie, I was like, holy shit, like, where did this come from? We haven't seen this at all. And then, of course, in retrospect, it makes sense. And you go, oh, like, I see where this was coming from. So I think he started out with bad intentions. And I think he was always kind of a little weasel. But I think he kind of couldn't help but fall for Felix a little bit, because Felix was, at the end of the day, even though, he's kind of rich and even though he's kind of out of touch to some degree,
He has a
he's
heart,
not really
right?
a bad guy. He does give him a fair shake, and he
Mhm.
thinks, he is genuine and kind of willing um, to help Oliver out despite the difference in social status. And I think Oliver kind of falls for that, but then obviously when his lies come to a head, he just has to go like, well, now or never. I guess it's you or me. And
Right.
he does what he's got to do. I guess more or less without hesitation. The film just kind of
I do
plows
I
through.
do like how Felix is written as, I mean, he could have been written as a real prick, as sort of like the rich prick.
Yeah.
And this movie does not. This movie doesn't fall into that trap. It ends up being, what is it, like the stepbrother or the half brother who ends up kind of being the
Yeah, the
half American
cousin or
brother,
something.
who ends up kind
Yeah.
of being, yeah, he ends up kind of being more the prick. What you would think that, sort of that sort of one dimensional writing of a rich character, but Felix really isn't that. He's very three dimensional. Yeah, you're like, he is aloof. He's aware of his privilege. He's aware that he comes from a very wealthy family, but he's still very benevolent. He's still very kind, and all of that. So I appreciate that very much in his character. The parents definitely have their own things, but there's nobody really in the family that seems completely untethered from reality. Like I've met with, I've worked with, I've been friends with very wealthy people, and you
Yeah.
see that the crazy aunt, you see the overly earnest, overly understanding mother. You see the sort of aloof father that's sort of just lost in his own hobbies. And then you have the kids that are sort of okay. You see the spoiled one, and then you have like the good one. All of these character types within this family don't seem too far off from things that I've seen in real life, and that really worked. I feel like there's a tendency to write more to a stereotype, because we need the rich guy to be a prick in order to elevate the poor character and his virtue, and obviously that they didn't
Right.
fall into the trap, and that wasn't the goal of the film in terms of the narrative anyway. But she could have done that, and again, like, if the first cut you could have made could have sort of been that of
Yeah.
Oliver just wanting to have more and to be more, and had to feeling that he had to pretend to be more because he's the poor kid at Oxford. Now that would have
Yeah.
worked, but we keep getting again more and more and more, which again makes the movie so brilliant.
Yeah. And yeah, I think especially considering Farley, who's the like cousin half brother
God, I hate it.
character.
I really.
Yeah, I agree. He was kind of freaking. Even though, like you said, he's kind of one dimensional in the sense that
I mean, I kind
he's
of
the
understood. I shouldn't. I didn't mean to say that I thought he was one dimensional. I
yeah,
mean, like, kind of made sense, like, because he's the one sort of on the outside. He's half American. He's biracial. A
yeah,
little bit of a chip on his shoulder. You could kind of see somebody who is like that, maybe view their rich white family and them being only sort of half the family, maybe coming off as having a bit of a chip on their shoulder and having to sort of prove and act rich. Do you know what I mean? So I wouldn't say that
Yeah.
he was one dimensional, but he was someone that God, he was just a prick. I hate bullies. Like, despite the fact that he was sort of an outsider, he was still kind of a bully. So, anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say, not necessarily one dimensional, but like we know what his purpose is within the narrative. Like he's there to be the kind of one of the gatekeepers that Oliver has to go against. But I think there was something about that, his character and the performance that felt, I think, despite that kind of, it had a certain like nugget of authenticity to it. Like I went to school, I went to like college in the UK. And there were a lot of very, very posh people there,
Sure.
who had that type of attitude to them, this kind of very haughty and sort of like trying to superior behavior and trying to one up you, seemingly like for no reason. It's like,
Yeah,
like
it's
when
yeah.
when he's first introduced, they're talking and he's just like, oh yeah. It's essentially it's like, well, I didn't really like your essay. And it's just like, where's this coming from, dude? Why? But that's something that you really, I think, tend to, those are the types of people that you tend to meet, particularly in kind of artistic and creative spaces.
Sure.
And I think, in that respect, I kind of know what it's like to be in this specific type of environment and be the person who's not from that same socioeconomic class, and to kind of get like, oh, I'm a little out of place here. These aren't necessarily the people for me. And so in that respect, the film has a lot of, again, these kind of like bits of and details that feel very authentic that I really enjoyed as well. Farley, how hateable and just kind of dickish that character is, I think is, again, kind of a testament to the quality of the writing and also the quality of the performance as well. Because there's a lot of little nuance with how, you know, the character will go up and he'll just kind of very subtly and sometimes not so subtly try and one up Oliver and just put him down out of nowhere for no reason.
Well,
And I think
we're constantly reminding him that you're not one of us. This
yeah,
isn't yours. It will never be yours because you're not us. And it's
Mhm.
again, it's a brilliant move in terms of the writing to make the one who's probably he's not 100% of the family, making him the one who has self-appointed himself the gatekeeper, because the true gatekeeper should be the mother, the father, any of the
yeah.
kids, and yet it is Farley
They're like
who.
the least gatekeeping people. They're so
Yeah,
open.
yeah, they don't. Yeah, they're the most. They're sort of that. They're really sort of the quintessential perfect upper class liberal family that is constantly working to show you that, oh, we don't see class, we don't see color, we don't see any of these things, which very well may
Yeah,
be true, but they're so earnest in their wanting to remind you, we're all equal here and we're all the same here. And then it ends up being the person who's sort of like the half brother who self-appoints himself as the gatekeeper and is constantly reminding the actual poor kid that he's being the one who's sort of being the classist bully. So again, another
yeah.
testament to the writing.
Right. Um, One of the other things that really stuck out with me too was, the kind of, I guess it's like the twist, because everything else that kind of follows is much more telegraphed. But just the twist that Oliver, throughout the whole film, Oliver is saying like, yeah, I came from a really poor background. My parents were dealing crack. My dad just died because he was like too drunk and fell and hit his head on the pavement. And now
Right.
my mother is like, she's incoherent and she's going to be back to doing and dealing drugs. Like, I never want to go home again. And it's partially the sob story that gets Felix to take him in.
Right.
Um, and and then it's totally not true at all. He's from this
Right.
very
And that's
nice,
revealed relatively early in the film. and you're sort of like, okay, where is this going to go? And then of course, obviously, Felix is upset. I'm like, okay, that was okay. So okay, there's something else to this, and that's again, it's pretty early on that, but you really buy into it, you know, because early on you don't know, but you're like,
Yeah.
oh man, this poor kid.
There's nothing to throw you into it, which is good.
Right.
And yeah,
And then
like
it
just
unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. God.
yeah, and the fact that it blindsides you in the same way that it blindsides Felix
Right.
is, I think, very good for kind of shifting the perspective. Um, you know, having that, being in that kind of sympathetic situation as a character experiences something is really great, because then it kind of shifts us away from like, oh, Oliver is, he's this poor guy, and he's not as wealthy as these other people, and so he's just trying to, kind of make it and do well for himself.
Right.
To, suddenly, like, and Felix is this kind of like aloof, rich douchebag, and then suddenly you go like, oh my god, like Oliver is just like this. He's very manipulative and destructive, and it's like suddenly, you're all the way with Oliver, and then you kind of split it, and that's where the moral ambiguity that we end the film with, I think, first really starts. Because that's then when we go, well, am I really rooting for this guy, or am I?
Do
I
you think
want him
there's a
to
moral
win or
ambiguity at the end? I don't think it's moral
fail.
ambiguous at all. I mean, it's very clear this guy is a psychopath, and like, okay, maybe they're a bit aloof. Maybe, I mean, again, this would be my thing. It's like, just because they were rich and weird and aloof and maybe a little disconnected, I don't think that means they deserve to die.
Yeah. Oh no.
Actually,
Yeah.
question.
Not
Going back to Farley, did I miss something, or was Farley the only one to get out? Wasn't he sort of shipped away? Um, wasn't he sent
Yeah.
away back? He actually was the only one who wasn't, you know. So that was an
Yeah.
interesting piece. Like, he was just, the father sent him away after some nonsense that he was set up for. I think he was set up for, but he's the only one
Yeah.
who wasn't off completely. And yeah.
Yeah, he was. And yeah, I would say I don't think it's necessarily morally ambiguous that what Oliver did was wrong. Like, he's definitely like a maniac. But
Mhm.
I think it's more about the moral ambiguity. Maybe not moral ambiguity, but the ambiguity of sort of how you feel about his character. Where it's like, where you start off and you're rooting for this character,
Right.
but then you yourself feel kind of, you along with Felix are tricked by him, and you buy into his sob story, and
Right.
then you're left with like, well, like he's still the main character, and I still kind of want to see him
Right.
succeed.
The
But
setup of him as the underdog from the very beginning is so
yeah,
well done that as
yeah,
things unfold, you're kind of like, okay, maybe it's a little bit of an obsession. Okay, maybe, or it's a little bit of a crush. Okay, maybe he's a little obsessed, and then it just keeps going. You're like, whoa, I can't believe I was in the tank for this dude at the beginning.
yeah, yeah, and
This,
that's that kind of like that being that conflictedness that I'm talking about.
no, exactly, and that's what makes the movie so fun, and this the ride you're on. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, Fennell, Emerald Fennell, who wrote and directed this, was asked. They asked her. Some people, I guess, were having a hard time making out the movie, and they asked her, what was your intention when you set out to make this movie, because it sort of plays with different genres and tropes, and I'm assuming these people just weren't that creative who asked the question. And they asked her, what type of film were you setting out to make? And she replied, and it's brilliant, because once you hear that answer after seeing the movie, it all makes sense. She's like, oh, I thought about making a vampire film without the vampire. And that's what he
That's
is.
a fun way to put it.
Think about it. That's what Barry is. That's what Oliver is. Like, he charms you, he gets in, and then he just levels everyone. And how is that any different than a Count Dracula or any vampire film you've ever seen?
Yeah, that's a very fun way to put it. You know, it's very similar to um, like Game of Thrones as well. I mean, that's an obvious comparison, but also it has this kind of like Shakespearean quality to it, I think, you know,
Oh,
where you
very,
have
very
like,
much Shakespearean tragedy sort of feel. Yes.
yeah, and you know, having this very sinister character just kind of weed his way into the family. It's a very cool, I think, setup to have. You know, it's this kind of classic, yeah, literary tragedy where we see just the downfall of this family
It's
at
it's
the
it's the,
hand monster.
right. No, exactly. I mean, it's the monster. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing. It's the shark in the water that you don't see until it's too late. And it's so brilliantly done. It really is. Um, and we've kind of
That last
covered.
shot,
What's that?
yeah, the last shot at the very end
Oh,
where he has the rocks, and it's like, man,
yeah. Yeah,
that's
it's
truly
a
hating.
beautiful little.
No, that's
It's
not
like
necessary.
putting a pin in it, just putting that nice little bow, that sort of psychotic um, bow on it really works. And
Yeah.
I know we kind of did it already, but as we kind of are trying to do, films that would pair well with something like Saltburn, I would highly recommend if somebody wants to see this movie, obviously watch it, but either watch after it or even before it, Fennell's first film, Promising Young Woman, which is, I think, at least as brilliant as Saltburn. It's a different kind of film. Uh,
Very
you
different.
know, she touches on, it's a woman's vigilante film, and it's so beautifully done as a vigilante film because it comes very much from a woman's point of view. It's not, when we make a vigilante film with a man, we kind of know at this point what some of the beats are going to be, what some of the tropes are going to be. And Promising Young Woman doesn't try to do that. It's something completely new and different. And have you seen Promising Young Woman?
No, actually, I've not seen the like
It's
full.
it, I
I
won't say
only get.
that, but it's I say it's Taxi Driver for the Me Too era. It really is, and it never once falls prey to the tropes of a vigilante film because it is, but it isn't. It's very much a
Mhm.
feminist film. It's very much, it has elements of vigilante and crime, but it's one of the most vulnerable films I've ever seen, and it's again has threads of the themes that were so beautiful in Saltburn. I think you were right to compare it to maybe a good pairing would be Parasite. I think is a good one too, because that movie's again a
Yeah.
brilliant achievement in terms of film. It's a great film,
Yeah.
and it touches on. Obviously, it deals with class way more than Saltburn and really puts it up front. But
Mm.
that's another solid one. And I guess since we let the cat out of the bag, I would mention maybe two other films that I don't think are. Somebody else brought this up to me, mentioned that, like, and I got pissed. He said, "Oh, it's just sort of like Wild Things." Wild Things from 1998 with Nev Campbell and Matt Dillon and Denise Richards from some year, yeah, from like 25 years ago. I don't think
Mm.
it's really like that. I know why they say that because of how there's similar threads to it, but Wild Things might be a fun one to watch. There's plenty of, I shouldn't say plenty. Wild Things has a bit of male nudity. I would say that, and some of the other threads are similar. And then really sort of hitting the nail on the nose would be Single White Female from '92. And I didn't want to, but again, we're sort of let a lot of the cats out of the bag. Single White Female was a fun movie, but you really kind of see where it's going more than midway through, and that's not Saltburn at all. Saltburn,
Yeah.
again, the onion keeps peeling. At some point, you realize, whoa, okay, this is dangerous, but it takes a while to get there. And are there any other
Yeah.
films that you think might relate or might be a fun pair? But I can't really think of a ton because it's so unique.
Yeah. Something else I just saw recently, maybe Phantom Thread. It's about You
Oh,
know,
I've seen
this like very toxic relationship
Oh yeah, yeah.
in this kind of like upper
That
dysfunction.
was a tough one for me. That was a tough one for me because it didn't resolve. It just it sort of showed you that there's this toxic relationship,
Yeah.
and then it never gets fixed. And I
Yeah.
oh, okay. You expected to sort of turn a corner. I'm like, oh, it's just going to stay that way. I'm like, wow. But beautifully
Yeah.
shot, beautifully acted, beautifully written. But yeah, that sort of left me. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, I don't have much more on this. Any closing thoughts? Any other Rex pairings?
No, I think that's I think pretty much said it all.
Yeah, again, Saltburn. It's a really it's a film unto itself. It's one of those genre bending, genre mixing films that you really should see, and hopefully you've seen it. If you've gotten to this point, and we've really ruined it for you. Um, this is a movie I will continue to watch and rewatch because of the execution just being so beautifully done. But these other films too that we've mentioned, if you haven't seen them, definitely check out Parasite. Definitely watch Promising Young Woman for sure. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, this is where we're trying to be. We're trying to be short and sweet. And again, thank you for watching. Again, check out the movies we've recommended. If there's anything that you guys think we've missed, if there's something that's Saltburn adjacent, or maybe any, if it relates to it in any way, or just stuff you think we should watch and review, please mention in the comments below. We'll absolutely take a look at it. And yeah, thanks again, Truman. Thanks again, you all, for watching. Please like, subscribe, share. We are a super tiny channel right now, and we're trying to grow. And until next time, thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.
Right.